Let me take you back to a moment that, for years, I wouldn't have dared to share. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that starts with a to-do list and a false sense of control. I was running errands, balancing a grocery bag in one hand and my phone in the other, scrolling through emails with that determined efficiency we all try to summon. My phone buzzed, and it was a message, just a few words from someone I deeply cared about. The words were sharp, though not explicitly cruel. But you know how it is. Sometimes it's not what someone says, it's how it lands. And these words, they landed like a punch to the gut. I could feel my chest tighten, my throat constrict, and I wanted desperately to cry right there in the parking lot, but I didn't. I stuffed the phone back into my pocket, plastered on a neutral expression, and walked into the store like nothing had happened. I told myself, "You're fine. It doesn't matter. Keep moving." I even caught my reflection in the freezer door at one point, nodding at myself like some kind of internal coach. "Act as if nothing bothers you," I whispered under my breath. It wasn't the first time I'd given myself that pep talk, and it wouldn't be the last. What's funny or not so funny is that nobody around me would have known. I kept my head high, exchanged polite smiles with strangers, and cracked a joke with the cashier about the rising price of eggs. On the outside, I was composed, put together, maybe even a little charming. On the inside, though, I was unraveling. Later that evening, I replayed the moment over and over again, dissecting it like a scientist with a microscope. What did they mean by that message? Was it meant to hurt me, or was I just being overly sensitive? And why couldn't I just let it roll off my back like I pretended to? But here's the kicker. Even as I sat there spiraling, I didn't reach out to anyone. I didn't call a friend, didn't share my feelings with a loved one. Why? Because I was afraid of being seen as weak or needy. I was afraid that admitting I was hurt would somehow diminish me in their eyes, or worse, in my own. So I stayed silent. I told myself, "You don't need anyone else. You've got this." And for a while, I believed it. I convinced myself that this was the right way to handle things, that bottling it up was a sign of strength. I thought, if I act like I'm unbothered long enough, maybe I'll actually start to feel that way. But it didn't work. Not really. Because while I was busy trying to convince the world that nothing could touch me, I was also building a fortress around my heart. And inside that fortress, it was lonely. It was exhausting. What's interesting is that the people around me started to notice something was off, even if I didn't tell them outright. "You're quiet lately," someone said. "Are you sure you're okay?" I brushed it off with a wave of my hand. "Oh, I'm fine," I replied, adding a quick laugh to seal the deal. "Nothing to see here, folks." But deep down, I knew I wasn't fine. And the more I pretended to be, the more distant I felt from others, from myself, from the kind of life I actually wanted to live. This wasn't the first time I'd worn the mask of someone who has it all together, and it wouldn't be the last. But that day, standing in the middle of the frozen food aisle, holding a bag of peas like it was a life raft, I started to question whether the act was worth it. We've all been there, haven't we? That moment where something lands wrong, stings a little too deeply, or lingers in the corners of your mind long after it should. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, or how strong you think you've become. Life has a way of testing the limits of your composure. Maybe it's a snide comment from a colleague in a meeting, the kind that's wrapped in politeness but cuts all the same. Or perhaps it's a friend who forgets something important to you, leaving you to wonder if they care as much as you do. And yet, how do we respond? Most of the time, we don't. We tell ourselves to shake it off, to rise above it, to act as though nothing bothers us. It's a script we've been handed from childhood, isn't it? From the playground to the boardroom, we're taught that emotions, especially the messy, uncomfortable ones, are best kept hidden. Think about it. How many times have you heard someone say, "Don't let them get to you"? It's practically ingrained in us, this idea that strength is measured by our ability to stay unaffected. And so we bury the hurt, plaster on a smile, and carry on as though the world hasn't left its mark on us. But let's be honest, it's not always easy, is it? Because while the outside world sees our calm, unshaken exterior, the inside tells a different story. Inside, there's that knot in your stomach, that lump in your throat, that relentless replaying of the moment that shouldn't have mattered but somehow does. It's a universal struggle, this tension between what we feel and what we show. No one is immune to it, not the person sitting quietly in the back of the room, hoping to go unnoticed, not the confident leader who seems to have all the answers, not the friend who's always the first to offer advice, but never the first to ask for help. We all do it, don't we? We all wear the mask, each of us for our own reasons. For some, it's about control, a way to maintain order in a world that can feel chaotic and unpredictable. For others, it's about protection, a shield against the judgment or rejection we fear might follow if we let our guard down. And for many of us, it's simply a habit, something we've done for so long that we don't even question it anymore. But here's the thing, pretending to be unbothered doesn't make the feelings go away. It just pushes them deeper, where they quietly take root. And over time, those buried emotions start to shape us in ways we don't always recognize. They make us guarded, they make us hesitant, they make us feel disconnected from others, from ourselves, from the life we wish we could live. And yet we continue, because there's a kind of comfort in the act, isn't there? A strange, bittersweet comfort in convincing ourselves that we're strong enough to handle it all on our own. We tell ourselves that not showing hurt is the same as not feeling hurt, that stoicism is strength, that vulnerability is a risk we can't afford to take. But even as we cling to these beliefs, there's a quiet voice inside whispering that maybe, just maybe, there's another way. Let's talk about the armor we wear, not the kind forged in steel or strapped across our shoulders, but the kind we create within ourselves, the emotional armor, the invisible shield we carry every day. It's something we've all built over time, isn't it? Piece by piece, layer by layer, forged from moments when the world felt just a little too sharp, a little too harsh. Think about your first memory of hurt. Maybe it was in grade school when you raised your hand to answer a question and got it wrong, and the class laughed. Or maybe it was later, the first time someone broke your trust, a friend, a partner, a family member. Those moments sting, don't they? And when they do, there's a voice in your head that says, never let this happen again. That's when the armor starts to take shape. It begins small, almost imperceptibly, a guarded response here, a deflection there. We learn to tuck away our vulnerabilities, to protect the softest parts of ourselves from the possibility of harm. Over time, that armor grows thicker. We get better at hiding, at pretending, at creating the illusion that we're untouchable. And the world, it doesn't just encourage this, it rewards it. Strength, we're told, looks like resilience, independence, and an unwavering ability to keep moving forward no matter what. So we polish our armor and wear it proudly, telling ourselves that it's the only way to survive in a world that often feels unforgiving. But let's take a closer look at what that armor really is. For some, it's humor, the kind of quick wit that can turn any serious moment into a joke. You know the type, right? The person who always has a laugh at the ready, who never lets anyone see when something cuts too deep. For others, it's perfectionism, an obsessive need to control every detail, to never make a mistake, to always be seen as capable and competent. And then there are those whose armor is silence, who retreat behind walls so high and thick that no one can get close enough to hurt them. The truth is, we all have our version of it, and at first it seems to work. It keeps the world at bay, keeps us from feeling the sting of rejection, failure, or criticism. It gives us the illusion of safety, the illusion that we are in control. But here's what we don't always see. Armor doesn't just keep pain out, it also keeps connection out. It creates a barrier between us and the people who care about us, the people who want to see us, really see us for who we are. And the heavier that armor gets, the more exhausting it becomes to carry. Yet we keep adding to it. Why? Because letting go of the armor feels terrifying. It feels like standing naked in a storm, exposed to the elements with no guarantee that we'll be okay. The armor has been our protection for so long that the thought of taking it off feels like a risk too great to bear. And so we cling to it. We convince ourselves that it's necessary, that without it we'd be too vulnerable, too fragile, too human. Even when it isolates us, even when it weighs us down, even when it starts to feel like the armor is no longer protecting us but trapping us, we hold on to it because it feels safer than the alternative. But here's the thing about all that armor: it doesn't come without a cost. We think it's there to protect us, and in some ways it does. It keeps us from feeling the full brunt of pain, rejection, or disappointment in the moment. But over time, the armor takes on a weight of its own, a quiet but relentless heaviness that we carry into every aspect of our lives. At first, it feels manageable. It's like wearing a jacket that's just a little too heavy, uncomfortable, but bearable, But as the years go by, the weight grows. Every hurt we deflect, every vulnerability we hide, every emotion we suppress adds another layer, another piece to the shell we've built around ourselves. And eventually, it starts to affect us in ways we don't always recognize. One of the most profound impacts is on our relationships. The armor that we think is protecting us from harm is often the very thing that keeps us from forming deep, meaningful connections. And how can someone truly know you if you're always presenting a version of yourself that's polished, curated, and carefully controlled? How can they understand your heart if you never let them see what's inside? Think about the moments when someone close to you has asked, "Are you okay?" and you responded with, "I'm fine," even when you weren't. Think about the times you've brushed off a compliment, downplayed an achievement, or laughed off a hurtful comment, all because letting someone see the real you, the raw, unfiltered you, felt too risky. Over time, those small acts of self-protection create distance. They make it harder for the people who care about us to reach us, to connect with us on a level that feels real. And it doesn't stop there. The armor doesn't just affect how others see us, it also affects how we see ourselves. When we spend so much time pretending to be unbothered, we start to lose touch with our own emotions. We become disconnected from our needs, our desires, and even our pain. We convince ourselves that we're strong because we don't let things get to us, but deep down, we know that's not the whole truth. We know there's a difference between being strong and simply being numb. This disconnection can spill over into every part of our lives. At work, we might find ourselves striving for perfection, afraid to admit when we're overwhelmed or unsure. In friendships, we might keep conversations light and surface level, avoiding anything that feels too personal or vulnerable. And in our private moments, we might feel an achy we can't quite name, a sense that something is missing, even if we can't put our finger on what it is. The irony is that the very armor we build to keep us safe often ends up keeping us stuck. It keeps us from taking risks, from pursuing the things we really want, because the fear of failure, or even just the fear of being seen as flawed, feels too great. It keeps us from having hard conversations, from saying, "This hurt me," or "I need help," or "I don't know what to do." It keeps us from experiencing the full range of life's emotions, from the highs of joy and connection to the lows of sadness and vulnerability. And the longer we wear the armor, the harder it becomes to take it off. It starts to feel like a part of us, like something we can't live without. But at what cost? What do we lose when we spend our lives pretending to be unaffected? When we tell ourselves that showing hurt or fear or sadness is a sign of weakness? What do we miss out on when we prioritize the appearance of strength over the messy, beautiful reality of being human? So if the armor we wear is weighing us down, what do we do about it? How do we move forward when taking it off feels so daunting, so unfamiliar that we don't even know where to begin? The first step is recognizing that the armor isn't the enemy. It served a purpose once, didn't it? It helped you navigate difficult moments, protected you when you weren't ready to face the full weight of certain experiences. There's no shame in having worn it. It's a testament to your resourcefulness, your resilience. But now it's about learning when to set it aside. And that starts with awareness. Pay attention to the moments when you feel yourself reaching for the armor. Maybe it's the way you laugh too quickly after someone makes a hurtful joke. Maybe it's the way you deflect a compliment with a self-deprecating remark. Maybe it's the way you keep conversations focused on others so you don't have to talk about yourself. These are clues, tiny signals that the armor is slipping into place. The more you notice them, the more you can begin to question them. Ask yourself, what am I protecting myself from right now? Is it rejection, judgment, discomfort? And then, here's the hard part, what would happen if I let myself feel those things? This isn't about throwing yourself into every vulnerable situation without caution. It's about choosing moment by moment to let yourself be seen a little more clearly, a little more clearly, a little more honestly. Start small. Vulnerability isn't an all or nothing proposition. You don't have to strip away every piece of your armor overnight. Maybe it's sharing something with a trusted friend that you've been holding back. Maybe it's admitting that you're struggling instead of brushing it off. Maybe it's simply allowing yourself to sit with an uncomfortable emotion instead of pushing it away. And as you practice, you'll start to notice something remarkable. The world doesn't end when you let your guard down. In fact, more often than not, the people around you respond with empathy, with understanding, with a kind of connection that feels so much deeper than the surface level exchanges we're used to. Vulnerability, as uncomfortable as it might be, has this incredible way of creating space for genuine connection. Another step forward is redefining what strength means to you. For so long, we've been taught that strength is about endurance, about never showing weakness, about standing tall no matter what. But what if strength is something entirely different? What if strength is saying, I'm hurt, and that's okay? What if it's asking for help when you need it, or admitting when you don't have all the answers? What if strength is the courage to show up as your whole, imperfect self, even when it feels risky? And let's talk about boundaries, because they're an essential part of this process. Being vulnerable doesn't mean exposing every part of yourself to everyone all the time. It's not about oversharing or abandoning the filters that protect your mental and emotional well-being. It's about choosing where and when to lower the armor, about deciding who has earned the right to see the parts of you that feel tender or raw. Vulnerability without boundaries isn't authenticity, it's chaos. Another path forward is to practice self-compassion. This is perhaps one of the hardest steps because it means letting go of the inner critic that tells you to toughen up, to stop being so sensitive, to just get over it. Instead, what if you could meet yourself with kindness? What if you could say, it's okay to feel this way? It's okay to not have it all figured out. Self-compassion isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It's the foundation that allows you to face the world without the constant need for armor. And then there's the practice of giving yourself permission. Permission to feel what you feel without judgment. Permission to make mistakes, to be wrong, to learn. Permission to rest when you're tired, to cry when you're sad, to celebrate when you're happy, even if those emotions don't fit neatly into the image you think you're supposed to present. As you navigate this path, know that it's not linear. There will be days when it feels easy to set the armor down, and there will be days when you pick it up again without even realizing it. That's okay. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. It's about learning to live with the discomfort of vulnerability, because you've seen what's on the other side: connection, authenticity, freedom. And perhaps the most important step of all is reminding yourself again and again that you are enough. Not because you've built an impenetrable wall around yourself, but because you are human, flawed, messy, and beautifully real. So now here's the invitation, the call to action that only you can answer. It's not loud or demanding. It doesn't come with flashing lights or dramatic fanfare. It's quiet, steady, and deeply personal. It's the invitation to take the first step toward living without the weight of all that armor. Not because the world will suddenly become gentler or because hurt and disappointment will magically disappear, but because you deserve to show up in your own life as you truly are without the layers of pretense holding you back. This is your chance to stop merely surviving and start living fully. It begins with small, intentional choices. Choose to let someone in, even just a little. Share a part of yourself that you've been keeping hidden, not with everyone, but with someone who's earned your trust. Choose to sit with your feelings, even the uncomfortable ones, without rushing to cover them up or push them aside. Choose to tell yourself the truth, even when it feels vulnerable, even when it feels risky. It's not about throwing caution to the wind. It's about leaning into the discomfort of being seen. It's about showing up for yourself in ways you never thought possible. Imagine just for a moment what it might feel like to stop carrying the weight of pretending. Imagine the freedom of no longer worrying about how others perceive you, of no longer silencing your own voice to maintain an illusion of strength. And as you step into this new way of being, notice how the world begins to shift. Notice how your relationships deepen when you're willing to let the people who care about you see the real you. Notice how your confidence grows, not the kind of confidence that comes from pretending you're invincible, but the kind that comes from knowing you're enough, exactly as you are. Notice how much lighter life feels when you no longer have to carry the constant weight of perfection, of control, of hiding. This isn't a path you have to walk alone. Vulnerability is contagious in the best way. When you show up as your authentic self, you give others permission to do the same. You create a ripple effect, a quiet revolution of honesty and connection that has the power to transform not just your life, but the lives of those around you. And isn't that what we all want deep down? To feel seen, to feel understood, to feel like we belong not because of the masks we wear, but because of the truth we bring to the table. So here it is, the call to courage, to let go of the stories that say you have to be perfect, that you have to have it all together, that you have to hide the parts of yourself that feel too tender, too raw, to step out from behind the armor, even if it's just for a moment, and trust that you are worthy of love and connection just as you are. And yes, it will be uncomfortable at first. Vulnerability always is. But that discomfort, it's a small price to pay for the freedom, the joy, the authenticity that waits on the other side. It's the price of stepping into a life that feels real, a life that feels whole, a life that feels unapologetically yours. The truth is, we don't need to pretend to be unbothered to be strong. Strength isn't about masking our pain or hiding our truth. It's about showing up fully and authentically, even when it feels hard. It's about choosing connection over perfection, courage over comfort, and vulnerability over the illusion of invincibility. Yes, the world can be tough, and yes, it will still throw challenges our way. But we don't have to face those challenges from behind a wall of armor. We can face them as we are imperfect, human, and beautifully resilient. Because when we allow ourselves to be seen, we discover something extraordinary, that the very thing we thought made us weak, our vulnerability, is the thing that makes us strong. So let today be the day you decide to loosen the grip on your armor. Start small, be gentle with yourself, and trust that who you are is more than enough. Step forward, not as someone who has it all together, but as someone who is brave enough to embrace the messiness of being human. Because in the end, that's where the magic happens. That's where we find connection, belonging, and the kind of strength that doesn't just endure but thrives. And isn't that the life we're all searching for?